Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Yep, back again. Pandemic continues. We continue to try and do our pandemic projects to kind of take our minds off of what's going on in the world. But there's folks that can't do that. Those are our first responders and our essential personnel and our law enforcement, and government workers and teachers and everybody that's kind of been dealing with this on the front lines day in and day out. A special thank you to them as we try and just do our part, stay socially distanced and respectful, and try to get through this all together. So today my project is a Penn Long Beach 68, and I started to take this one apart. Beautiful reel. It came in from Kevin in Arizona. I started taking it apart and I realized I don't have the Penn 68 in my library. It's the largest of the Long Beach series. It's almost identical to a Penn Senator 4.0 black side-plated one, but not, it's missing the outside chrome ring basically. But I wanted to show you how to service this reel in case you have one, and how to take it apart, inspect the pieces and parts, service the internals, and put it back together again. And that's what this video will be about. Unfortunately, I took this one apart already. The good news is that all of the Penn Long Beach series pretty much follows the same take apart sequence. And so I have a Penn 65, which is kind of the little brother of that Penn 68, and I'll show you. So we start by taking off the external pieces, and then you can we'll pick it up with that reel in a basket, and we'll show you how to do the rest of that. So this one needs to be rebuilt as well. I've done videos on the Long Beach 65 and the 60 and the 285 Delmar. So they're kind of similar in nature, but you remove the set screw that holds the handle screw in place. I use an Allen Tanny wrench for that, but you can certainly use the one that came in the box if you have that one. It's just a little thinner, and if you work on a lot of reels, that wrench is a good alternative there. And once you do that, I like to take the handle off by backing the star adjuster off, pushing it up rather than trying to wrench that handle. Then we can take that adjuster off. As you can see, this one's going to need to be cleaned, but otherwise it's functioning nicely, and it will be serviced down the road. But right now I just want to use that to show you how I got to the disassembled part on the other. So there's 6 side plate screws that you want to take off next. That's not true with the bigger brother. There's an extra cross post in there, so just beware. And notice that when you take the side plate screws off, that there's 2 screws that are shorter than the other 4, and those are the ones that go in the reel seat. So these are the screws, and one is shorter than the other. The 2 short ones go into the reel seat here. Okay, I'm just going to take these 2 off, and I'll explain the rest as we got through that. I use a parts tray. You may see it here. You also saw it in the other one. But all of the pieces I take off, I put it in a parts tray so that I know where they are when I go to reassemble the reel. I also wear a protective glove because I'm never quite sure what's going to be on the inside of this reel in terms of grease and lubrication and dirt and anything else. But it just helps protect my hand. Okay, so I took the 6 side plate screws out. There's no magic here. You just pull the side plate off. This one's in nice condition internally, but all reels need to be serviced on a regular basis, and a lot of folks say, what is the regular basis? Well, the regular basis, my recommendation is 1 year at a max, and if you fish the reels heavily, kind of stop midway through the season and go do it again. And one assumes that you're kind of watching this, doing it yourself, so it's not an inconvenience during the middle of the season to spend 25 minutes or so and do the reel. All right, that's the sleeve that goes over our gear sleeve there. And then there's 4 bridge screws. Now notice I'm cupping my hand here because this reel has an anti-reverse dog and a spring underneath it. And if you just take these screws out to remove the bridge without cupping your hand, those screws can fly all over the place. One of the viewers sent in a recommendation which I thought was very good. If you're uncomfortable doing it this way, and you want to protect yourself from losing that spring, put this into a Ziploc bag, maybe a gallon-sized split lock Ziploc bag, before you push the bridge out. That way, if the spring does shoot, it'll be caught in the bag and not all over your desk somewhere. Okay, so these two screws have been released. You can see that the bridge assembly is falling down, and I just gently lift up the side plate and I can capture that spring. In this case, that spring didn't shoot. That spring that I'm referring to is right here, and that's your anti-reverse dog spring. So I put that into my parts tray so I don't lose it. Put that in there as well, put my dog in there, and I'm just going to take this whole assembly now and put that into this tray for my rebuild later on. But that's how we got to here, with the addition of me taking the side plate screws out of the crossbars on this side to give me the spool, the reel seat, and the crossbars as they appear here, all detached. So basically what we've done is we've taken the reel off, taken it apart in its entirety, and this parts tray has the internal pieces and parts for this reel. So let's take a look at those then, and let's show you how to service them. We have a bridge. Here's the same basic anti-reverse dog that we just found on the other. I'm going to pull the main gear and drag washers out. Now this one has an older style drag washer. It has what I call the asbestos brakes. The material is pretty much similar to the materials that are used on brake lining in cars. I'm just going to push those out. And these are kind of, they're frozen. That's what happens over time. The grease is dry and they sort of freeze to the plate. So I use a utility knife to separate those. I just go as a wedge. And there you go, they pop out pretty easily. And we're just going to make sure that we scrub those drag washers. And then this last one, I'm not sure if we can get out. We'll try. I go in from underneath. And this one's kind of in there. And 3 and 2 and 1. So I go underneath. I use a pick or a screwdriver or something to try and get leverage behind it. There you go. So we have that one out. Same deal here. It's just got a little bit of buildup on them. So this is your drag stack, and let's service that before we go further. So I'm going to use some steel wool here just to get the residual of the drags that were sticking to the metal pieces. I'll polish up the metal pretty nicely. You can see how it makes it nice and smooth. There's some tarnish on here that can't be removed, but that's just discoloration. It's not anything that's going to affect drag performance. We'll do it on the other side as well. And you want to do this because you want those drags to slip. Here's your middle one. And then we got one more we'll do over here. And I'm just using the steel wool to scrub it up. And get the back side of that as well, which is nice and clean. Okay, so we have the 3 drag washers. We have the 2 that are thicker than what you would normally find on the newer reels. And we have the red one which goes up top. Before we reinstall, this is tight. It should be tight. It's probably hasn't been serviced in quite some time based on the other piece. We're going to want to remove that gear sleeve, and you do that by getting a pin or a punch, pushing through on the little pin that holds this assembly to the bridge shaft. And then if you need a little assist, grab a pliers and lightly, just as you don't want to scar that pin, but just pull it out the rest of the way. This is the pin I'm referring to. And we can work that gear sleeve out just like that. Thank goodness those parts didn't fly when I did that. And we're going to just start the pin back in. You want to make sure that the bottom of the bridge sleeve is cleaned. Same thing, use the steel wool. You can see that there's some dry grease in there. Then you want to clean the post. That's what was sticky before, so you didn't have the slip. And finally, because this was a little tough, take some penetrating oil, fill that cavity, and go in with a cotton swab and just clean out the dirt that's inside. So that's in good condition now. Okay, so I'm going to take real grease then. It's Penn Precision real grease, and we're going to just go ahead and lubricate this now. Put a little bit onto that shaft, take the gear sleeve and insert that over the shaft, and then we want to push that pin back in. Sometimes you can get lucky and just use your fingernail. But make sure that when you put that pin back in, you clear this ridge here, otherwise you won't get the main gear out. Okay, I got a piece of steel wool just to get the what little remains inside there. We're good. I felt it nice and smooth. Check the teeth on your main gear. If there's any old grease in there, just go ahead and get a soft bristle brush. Use a toothbrush. This is a brass brush. You can use any of a number of things. Use a toothpick if you like. Just make sure that the channels are clear. And then what you do next is grab that same fishing reel grease and get a good amount of it onto the main gear. You don't have to get it in every tooth. Spinning around will spread that back and forth. And then insert that over the top. Okay, just make sure that these are smooth. Just a little bit of grease that I've had on my hands is certainly enough to do anything there. The thick washer goes on. Then these are called keyed washers. They are rectangular. They have two flat sides. They help hold the drags to that gear sleeve. Same thing, just feel the washer, make sure it's nice and smooth. Press that into the cavity. The middle washer is the eared washer. It has the two studs on the outside and it has the circle on the inside. That's what holds the main gear in the drag stack. That little guy just rolled, but we got it back. And then we have a thin red washer up top. And we have the last of the keyed washers that goes on top of that. And then finally in that drag stack we have a cap washer that sits on the top of that. So that's how you service the bridge side of this reel. Next up then, if we're looking at the other reel, we have a jack, a yoke, a pinion gear, two springs underneath. So that's what we want to assemble on this reel. So we'll go ahead and take this assembly. We're going to put some oil. In this case I'm using Realex, which is an aftermarket fishing reel oil. I'm going to use that just to lubricate the eccentric. You don't have to take that out. Just check for operation, make sure it works nice and smoothly. Then we have the two yoke springs going next. They sit in the cavities on both sides. Just like that. Now I have the yoke and the pinion gear. So again, we're going to do the same thing we did with the other metal parts. We're going to make sure that they're nice and slippery, so get any dry grease off of them. So this reel is near identical to the 4.0 Senator. The only thing with the black-sided 4.0 Senator, which is the low speed or the original one, is that it had one more trim plate. I took this trim plate from this side, and there's one on the other side that makes it just a little bit more hardy when getting slammed around the boat. It won't crack the side plate as easily. Okay, grease both shoulders of the yoke. Do the same thing here. Inspect that pinion gear. Make sure all the teeth are uniform, that they're not chipped, bent, cracked, or otherwise. And then go ahead and make sure you get a good amount of grease onto that as well. And this yoke assembly will sit on top of the stud here. We just want to make sure we get grease around the side of it, which is going to be on the inside of the pinion gear and also a little bit inside where the spool is going to ride. And then it just sits this way. Now there's a notch in this pinion gear. Make sure that that notch is facing out. It's very easy to face it in. If you face it in, you won't turn your spool. All right, here's the jack. That's the transition between the eccentric and the yoke, and that's going to enable free spool. All right, so we've just cleaned that up. The jack hooks, you press down on your yoke assembly, and then you hook the jack around that stud on the eccentric, and you make sure that the little stud from the side plate is in that channel there. That's all you need to do. To finish the assembly then, we're going to take our bridge plate and install that now. We start with it down. We push in on the yoke and we turn it about perpendicular to where it started. We're going to go get that anti-reverse dog. One of the fully threaded bridge screws, which goes underneath here on the left. And we're going to put our dog on. The dog needs to intersect with the little indentations on the back of that gear sleeve. And then we have a cavity here, and that's where that little spring goes. You got to be careful with this. This is it's prone to fly. So I start it on the one side and I keep pressure on it with my finger, and I kind of work it till I feel that it is sitting in the cavity and it's not sitting in the cavity there. So the best thing to do on that is just kind of take it out and start over. I was hooking the side of the rim with that for whatever reason. Let's try this again. For whatever reason, the end of this spring doesn't want to cooperate here. So let's start that over again. Okay, so the spring is going to sit in this cavity here. We're going to start by taking an end of the spring and loading it to the inside of the dog, and then working that spring around so that it fits into that cavity. And that's a properly loaded spring. Hopefully you can see that. It's laying in the cavity. And once you have that, be careful, but just rotate it until your hole in your bridge lines up with the screw that you've placed that anti-reverse dog on, and then give it a couple of turns just to get it started. I don't like tightening it all down at that point. Now I didn't mention on the front end of this when I was taking these off, but there are two different types of bridge screws. There's a partially threaded one and a fully threaded one. The partially threaded ones go up top. That's where your springs ride on. And what I like to do in this is go north, south, east, west in the way that I install. Keeps the balance on the bridge. And I'll come down here and I'll put the second fully threaded one, which goes on the bottom. And none of these are getting tightened all the way down yet. I want to leave the play in the bridge so that I can have some flexibility to get those screws started. Because usually what happens is they get a little bit out of sync, and this is a pretty tightly engineered bridge. I think we probably just got it there. So you want to make sure that every one of them is started before you go tightening down. Once you do, which is just what happened there, we're going to go ahead and kind of work in opposite direction. Make sure that they all get tight. And then before you go any further, give it a test. Make sure that you hear that anti-reverse working. Okay, the drag adjuster sleeve goes on. And then we can start reassembling the chrome pieces for this. So I'm going to start with the opposite side here. We're not going to use my grease to get some grease into that side plate bearing adjuster there. It doesn't hurt to get a little bit onto the click ratchet as well. Those things are prone to rusting. Somebody had asked me on my forum, how do you fix that? Well, you fix it with penetrating oil, basically. That's about all you can do there. All right, so I've taken the screws out on this. You can oil the screws. And Eddie just came on board and said, why don't you oil all your pieces? There's nothing wrong with that. Go right ahead and put some oil in there to prevent it from seizing in the future. You can put a drop on there. I'm just going to work my way around here. I'm hand tightening this only at this point, but you can see the beautiful chrome that's on this reel, and this reel's probably 40 years old at least. Now this is unlike the other Long Beach I showed you in that it has 3 crossbars on each side versus the 2 on the 65 series. And again, just like the 4.0 Senator, it's got the 6 crossbars as opposed to the 4. Do the same on this side. Just build that cage. This one cleaned up very nicely. Then there's one more, and then we have our reel seat. I like to put the crossbars on before I put the reel seat on, just because it's easier to balance. Just is a little bit of a awkward thing to try and load the reel seat. And you'll notice with these that when I take one side of those metal pieces off, I always put the screws right in there. That way I don't confuse them when I go to reinstall. But as I mentioned earlier, the side plate screws for the reel seat are smaller than the ones for the cross posts. There's a reason for that. You don't want those screws sticking through the reel seat because they can snag the line. So they've gone to a smaller piece in length. Alright, that's the second of the reel seat screws. There you go. And then once you have all of them in, you can go back and tighten. So that's what we'll do here. And then we'll just insert that spool, and we'll take care of the balance of this. All right, the spool is a beautiful spool. Nice heavy chrome from back in the day. I get grease on both sides of the shaft. The one with the click rotor belongs on the non-gear side. And best to do this with the free spool in off. Just load that over the top. And then what I do here is the same thing I did with the screws from the other side. I'm going to alternate how I put them in just to keep equal tension. And here's a quick way to keep those screws oiled and lubed so that they don't stick in the piece. Now these shouldn't stick in. These are stainless steel screws, but what do they say? An ounce of prevention. Didn't take me anything to do that, so if you like, go ahead and oil the screws so that they don't get stuck. That's a great exercise on some of these spinning reels that have steel screws. Make sure that you oil those, because those steel screws will rust, and if they rust, you may not get them out. Alright, so I did one on each side. Now I'm going to go down and take the shorter screw, put that into the reel seat. Grab the other one, put that over here. Tie those off. And then again, I continue to alternate these just to keep the the side plate tension from buckling or being warped in any way. Some folks want to do it in a circular fashion just because they're close to each other, and I just don't want to risk having a plate that's out of round because I went in a circular fashion. Now on this one, it probably doesn't matter too much. You got these trim rings. It's an older reel. It's a solid, sturdy piece. But when you start getting into these graphite frames or single piece frames, it can make a difference. So just be careful with that. All right. On this side, one back on the other side, and we'll pretty much be ready just to put the finishing pieces on this and give it a test drive. So if you like this, I ask you to please subscribe to see more. And I ask you to hit those notifications so you don't miss when I post, which during the pandemic I've been trying to post every day just to kind of keep everybody's sanity up and maybe a little bit of escapism, if you will. And also, if you're working on your reels during this pandemic, maybe you'll find the reel that you own that you want to service. So it's always good to hit the notification button for the subscriptions. And by the way, it helps my channel out as well. And I appreciate that. If you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, maybe you're servicing one and you're stuck, just ask the question in the comments and I'll try and answer that for you. And then hopefully you'll be back on track to finish repairing your reel. All right, so what I did then, I just put this star adjuster on. Now I'm going to put the handle on. And the handle screw. So kind of reversing the way we took it off. I like to tighten by hand as much as I can. That way I know I'm not cross-stripping it. And then I'll just use the wrench here to finish this off. One more screw and then we'll give it a test drive. I just noticed I'm a little bit tight on that star adjuster. So it's always a good idea to kind of tighten down your drag before you tighten down your handle screw. That's what we just did there. Now we got the freedom. Now we'll just tighten this down. Align that little scallop in the screw with the hole so that you can get your tie down screw in there. And then we'll just tighten this. And we'll be ready for a test drive. And Kevin will be ready to take this reel fishing. Okay, there you go. One beautiful Penn 68 Long Beach. Okay, you want to just back off the adjuster a little bit there. Make sure it spins freely, which it does. There should be just a little bit of side-to-side plate. You hear that knocking? That side-by-side knocking is just what you want, just a little tap. You don't want to, if it's wrapping, it's too much. So that should fix that. Yeah, look at that. Just the right amount of play in it. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, if you like it, please subscribe. If you want to see more, hit those notifications. Questions, please leave them in the comment section. And finally, if you have a reel that needs to be serviced, well, I do that by mail as well. And I can provide you the information on my reel services if you contact me by email on the business card that follows. So with that, thanks again to all the first responders and frontline personnel. And please, everybody, stay safe and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.